Hi everyone, this is Mahesh, lecturer in English, Sahyadri College, Kolar. Dear students, this is my third video on the poem Water, which is written by Challapalli Swaruparani. As I already told, the poem is an extract from her anthology, The Exercise of Freedom. And I already told you, the poem deals with the practices of untouchability. The poem is about untouchability, and here the poem is divided into two parts. In the previous two classes, we discussed the first part of the poem, in which water remains as witness for the practices of untouchability, and how there were quarrels for the sake of water between village and the Wada, and how untouchability was practiced in the name of water. So these are all the points we discussed in the previous class. Now, in this class, we shall discuss the first part of the poem again and go to the second part. I already told you water is omniscient and omnipresent. Omniscient in the sense the one who knows everything. So, here, since water knows everything, we say water is omniscient. Let us see how it is. The poet says water is a witness for the centuries of old stripe, generations of old stripe, that is, untouchability. It was practiced between village and the Wada. For this practice, for this generation's old stripe, for this practice of untouchability, for these quarrels between village and the Wada, water remains as witness, because water knows the ground's incline. It knows the boundaries of the earth, and it knows in which parts of the country what kind of people are living, and what are their practices, and how there is untouchability practiced. Everything it knows. And also the poet says the fact, that is, untouchability is like a dampness on the well's edge. Here untouchability is compared to dampness on the well's edge in the first part of the poem. Here well's edge never dries, untouchability in the society never disappears. So this is what the poet says. And coming to talk about the second paragraph of the poem, here we discuss about the difference of race between Samaria woman and Jesus the Jew, and also we discuss the subcaste difference between leather and this spool. So for this, the poet gives a biblical incident which happened between Samaria woman and Jesus the Jew, and this one I already told you in the previous class. And there is also a subcaste difference between leather and the spool. So here leather is compared to cobbler and spool is compared to weaver. So for this caste difference and subcaste difference, water remains as witness and it knows everything. And in the third paragraph of the poem, the poet says, water knows the agony of the Panchama. Water knows the pain of the Panchama. Here, what is the pain of the Panchama? The pain is that he had to wait for a pot of water near the well all day with his empty pot until a Shudra arrives. So Shudra had to come and give him water. If no Shudra arrived, he would not get the water. But here the painful thing is that all the human beings have the right to use the water, because water is a natural resource. Every human being, every creature on this earth has their own share of water. But here the Panchamas were denied of these rights, so that untouchability was practiced in those days, and for this pain of Panchama, water remains as witness. Water also knows the humiliation of the Vada girl. So here, what is the humiliation of the Vada girl? Vada girl had to drink water in the cupped hands, and the higher caste people used to pour water from a distance into her hands, and the water falls all over her body, and the person who was pouring the water used to touch her. So this was the humiliation of the Vada girl, and this humiliation was understood by the water but not by the person who was pouring the water from the distance. So this is what the humiliation of the Vada girl. Next one is that it knows the righteous rage of Karmachedu Suvartama. Here Karmachedu Suvartama, she opposed the Kamma landlords when they were washing the empty buckets in the pure water or the tank or the well which was belonged to Suvartama or the untouchables. So at this time there was a quarrel between Karamchedu Suvartama and landlords, Kamma landlords. Here Karmachedu Suvartama raised her empty pot to hit the Kamma landlords. So this was the cruel incident happened in Prakasham district, Andhra Pradesh. The name of the place is Chiral Taluk. So this is what the righteous rage of Karmachedu Suvartama, and even for this quarrel, this righteous rage of Karmachedu Suvartama, water remains as witness, and water knows everything, and water is a witness to the centuries of social injustice. This is what we discussed in the first 5 stanzas of the poem, that is the first part of the poem, and now we shall move to the second part, in which we discuss how the poet remembers her childhood days and how she remembers the practices of untouchability when she was a child. Let us see the second part of the poem. Here, I would like to tell you one thing. The first person pronoun I refers to the poet Chalapalli Swaruparani, a Dalit poet. She was also treated as untouchable, and here the poet remembers her childhood days and how they struggled for water and how many moments they fought for the sake of water and how many people shed their blood and how many people sacrificed their lives for the sake of water, and at last whether they got freedom or not to drink the water or use the water. So these are all the points we are going to discuss in the second part of the poem. Let us see. I'll read out for you. Open the textbook, follow the lines. When I see water, I remember how my Vada which would thirst all day for a glass of water. Here the poet says the poet remembers her childhood day. That is, whenever she sees water, she remembers how the Vada people waited all day for a glass of water. Though they were thirsty, they had no right to drink the water in the utensils or the glasses, but they had to wait for the Shudra's arrival. This is what very cruel thing, the personal experience of the poet, that she had to wait for, or the Vada people had to wait for the Shudra's arrival, and they had to wait all day for a glass of water. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಪೊಯೆಟ್ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, ಯಾವಾಗ ನೀರನ್ನು ನೋಡ್ತಾರೆ ಅವರಿಗೆ ಅವರ ಬಾಲ್ಯದ ನೆನಪಾಗತ್ತಂತೆ. ಏನದು ಬಾಲ್ಯದ ನೆನಪು? ನೀರನ್ನು ನೋಡಿದಾಗ ಬಾಯಾರಿಕೆಯಿಂದ ಒಂದು ಗ್ಲಾಸ್ ನೀರಿಗೋಸ್ಕರ ನಾವು ಯಾವ ರೀತಿಯಾಗಿ ಒಂದು ದಿನ ಪೂರ್ತಿ ಕಾಯ್ತಾ ಇದ್ವಿ, ಅದು ನನಗೆ ಜ್ಞಾಪಕ ಬರುತ್ತೆ ಈ ಒಂದು ನೀರನ್ನು ನೋಡಿದಾಗ. ಅಂದರೆ ನಾವು ಯಾವುದನ್ನು ಪಡೆಯೋದಕ್ಕೆ ತುಂಬ ಕಷ್ಟಪಟ್ಟಿರ್ತೀವೋ ಅದು ಮತ್ತೆ ಮತ್ತೆ ನೋಡಿದಾಗೆಲ್ಲ ನಮ್ಗೇನಾಗ್ತಾ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ಆ ಒಂದು ಕಷ್ಟ, ಆ ಒಂದು ನೋವು, ಆ ಒಂದು ದುಃಖ ನಮ್ಮ ನೆನಪಿಗೆ ಬರುತ್ತದೆ ಅಂತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಒಂದು ಮಾತು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನಮಗೆ ಸತ್ಯ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತದೆ ಈ ಒಂದು ಪೊಯೆಟ್ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಮಾತುಗಳನ್ನು ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ. In the next lines, let us see what she is going to say. Follow the lines. For us, water is not simply H2O. For us, water is a mighty movement. It is the Mahad struggle at Chadar tank. Here the poet says, us in the sense untouchables. Here the poet is saying water is not simply H2O for us, which means for Vada people, water is not a simple thing or water is not a just thing. She remembers the mighty movement which they fought for the sake of water, that is, Mahad struggle at the Chadar tank. So this incident happened in 1927 on March 20th, which was presided by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. In those days, there was no Maharashtra, it was called as Mumbai state. In the Mumbai state, in Kolaba district, there is a tank called Chadar tank where the untouchables were denied to use the water. In order to get the rights for using the water, a movement was fought that is called Mahad struggle. It was happened in 1927, presided by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Here, she remembers that mighty movement whenever she sees water. So she is saying, for us, water is not simply H2O. Then, for whom water might be a simply H2O, for the higher caste people, for the village people, water might be a simply H2O, but not for the untouchables because they had to struggle to get the water, they had to fight to get the water, and they had to wait for water. So the poet is saying water is not simply H2O for untouchables. This is what she remembers whenever she sees water. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಪೊಯೆಟ್ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ವಾಟರು ಅನ್ಟಚಬಲ್ಸ್ಗೆ ಒಂದು ಸಿಂಪಲ್ ಥಿಂಗ್ ಅಲ್ಲ. ಇದು ಬರೀ ನಮಗೆ H2O ಅಲ್ಲ, ಇದು ಬರೀ ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಥಿಂಗ್ ಅಲ್ಲ. ನಮಗೆ ನೋಡಿ, ಎಲ್ಲಿ ನಮಗೆ ನೀರು ಯಥೇಚ್ಛವಾಗಿ ಸಿಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನೀರು ಅಂದರೆ ಯಾರಿಗೂ ಸಹ ಲೆಕ್ಕಕ್ಕಿಲ್ಲ. ಅದೇ ರೀತಿಯಾಗಿ ಎಲ್ಲಿ ನೀರಿಗೆ ಜನ ತುಂಬ ಕಷ್ಟಪಡ್ತಾ ಇರ್ತಾರೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನೀರು ಯಾರಾದರೂ ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರೆ ನಮಗೆ ಕೋಪ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಅದೇ ರೀತಿಯಾಗಿ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಏನಾದರೂ ಬುದ್ಧಿ ಹೇಳಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಅನಿಸುತ್ತೆ ನಮಗೆ. ಯಾಕಂತಂದರೆ ನೀರಿಲ್ಲದೆ ಇರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಪ್ಲೇಸಲ್ಲಿ ನೀರು ನಮಗೆ ಬರೀ H2O ಆಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ, ಅದು ನಮಗೆ ದೊಡ್ಡ ವಸ್ತು ಥರ ಕಾಣಿಸುತ್ತೆ, ತುಂಬ ಕಾಸ್ಟ್ಲಿ ವಸ್ತು ಥರ ಕಾಣಿಸುತ್ತೆ. ಅದೇ ರೀತಿಯಾಗಿ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಪೊಯೆಟ್ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಅನ್ಟಚಬಲ್ಸ್ಗೆ ವಾಟರ್ ಅಂದರೆ ಬರೀ ಸಿಂಪ್ಲಿ H2O ಅಲ್ಲ, ಅದು ಅಂದರೆ ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ನಾಟ್ ಎ ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಥಿಂಗ್ ಅಂತ. ಆ ವಾಟರನ್ನು ನೋಡಿದಾಗ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಮಹಾದ ಸ್ಟ್ರಗಲ್ ಜ್ಞಾಪಕ ಬರುತ್ತಂತೆ. ಈ ಮಹಾದ ಸ್ಟ್ರಗಲ್ ಅಂತಕ್ಕಂಥದ್ದು ಮುಂಬೈ ಸ್ಟೇಟಲ್ಲಿ ಆಗಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಒಂದು ಇನ್ಸಿಡೆಂಟು. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಚಾದಾರ್ ಟ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಅಂತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಒಂದು ಟ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಆ ಟ್ಯಾಂಕಲ್ಲಿ ಅನ್ಟಚಬಲ್ಸು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನೀರನ್ನು ಕುಡಿಯೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಅವರಿಗೆ ಅವಕಾಶ ಇರೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಆದ್ದರಿಂದ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ B.R. ಅಂಬೇಡ್ಕರ್ ಅವರು ಏನು ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ, ಅನ್ಟಚಬಲ್ಸ್ಗೆ ಆ ಒಂದು ಚಾದಾರ್ ಟ್ಯಾಂಕಲ್ಲಿ ಇರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ನೀರನ್ನು ಕುಡಿಯೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಅರ್ಹತೆ ಸಿಗಬೇಕು, ಅವರಿಗೆ ರೈಟ್ಸ್ ಸಿಗಬೇಕು, ಅವರಿಗೆ ಫ್ರೀಡಮ್ ಸಿಗಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಒಂದು ಮೂಮೆಂಟನ್ನು ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಅದು ಮಹಾದ ಸ್ಟ್ರಗಲ್ ಅಂತ. ಅದಾಗಿದ್ದು 1927 ಮಾರ್ಚ್ 20th. ಸೊ ಆವತ್ತಿಂದ ಆ ಒಂದು ದಿನವನ್ನು ನಾವು ಸೋಷಿಯಲ್ ಎಂಪವರ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಡೇ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ, ಅದನ್ನು ಸೆಲೆಬ್ರೇಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ. Again she says, a single drop of water embodies tears shed over several generations. A single drop of water embodies means include ಅಂತ ಅರ್ಥ. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಇನ್ಕ್ಲೂಡ್ ಅಂತಂದರೆ ಒಂದು ಹನಿ ನೀರಲ್ಲಿ ಏನೇನಿದೆ ಅಂತ. ಒಂದು ಹನಿ ನೀರಲ್ಲಿ ಎಷ್ಟೋ ವರ್ಷಗಳ ಕಾಲ ಸುರಿಸಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಒಂದು ಕಣ್ಣೀರಿದೆ ಅಂತ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಪೊಯೆಟ್ ನಮಗೆ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅಂದರೆ ಆ ಒಂದು ಸಿಂಗಲ್ ಡ್ರಾಪನ್ನು ಪಡೆಯೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಅವರು ಎಷ್ಟು ವರ್ಷ ವೇಟ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕಾಯಿತು, ಎಷ್ಟು ಜನ ಕಣ್ಣೀರು ಸುರಿಸ್ಬೇಕಾಯಿತು ಅಂತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಒಂದು ಮಾತನ್ನು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಟು ಗೆಟ್ ಎ ಸಿಂಗಲ್ ಡ್ರಾಪ್ ಆಫ್ ವಾಟರ್ they had shed many tears for several generations according to the poet. She is saying a single drop of water includes tears shed for several generations. That means their fathers, their forefathers, everybody cried for water, and at last they could get a single drop of water, and in that single drop of water there is a tears of many generations and many people. And also she says, in the many battles we fought for a single drop of water, our blood flowed like streams. Yes, she remembers again the many fights they fought for the sake of water. She is saying, in the many battle we fought for a single drop of water, our blood flowed like streams. Here when she remembers water, when she sees water, she remembers how their blood flowed like streams for the sake of water, and how many people sacrificed their life. Everything she remembers when she sees water. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಪೊಯೆಟ್ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, ಈ ಒಂದು ಹನಿ ನೀರನ್ನು ಪಡೆಯೋದಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರ, ಈ ಒಂದು ಸಿಂಗಲ್ ಡ್ರಾಪ್ ವಾಟರನ್ನು ಪಡೆಯೋದಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರ ಎಷ್ಟೋ ಜನ ಅನ್ಟಚಬಲ್ಸು, ಎಷ್ಟೋ ಜನ ಗ್ರೇಟ್ ಲೀಡರ್ಸು ಅವರ ಒಂದು ರಕ್ತವನ್ನು ಸುರಿಸಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅಂದರೆ ವಿಲೇಜ್ ಪೀಪಲ್ಗೂ ಮತ್ತು ಈ ಅನ್ಟಚಬಲ್ಸ್ಗೂ ಏನಾಗ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು, ಜಗಳಗಳಾಗ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು. ಆ ಒಂದು ಜಗಳಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಎಷ್ಟೋ ಜನ ಅನ್ಟಚಬಲ್ಸ್ ಅವರ ಒಂದು ರಕ್ತವನ್ನು ಸುರಿಸಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಒಂದು ಮಾತನ್ನು ಹೇಳ್ತದೆ. ಅಂದರೆ ಎಷ್ಟೋ ವರ್ಷಗಳ ಕಾಲ ಸುರಿಸಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂತಹ ರಕ್ತದ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರತಿಫಲ ಇವತ್ತು ನಮಗೆ ನೀರು ಸಿಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ಅರ್ಥ. ಅದೇ ರೀತಿಯಾಗಿ ಎಷ್ಟೋ ವರ್ಷಗಳ ಕಾಲ ನಮ್ಮ ತಾತಂದರು, ನಮ್ಮ ಮುತ್ತಾತಂದರು, ನಮ್ಮ ತಂದೆ ತಾಯಿ ಕಣ್ಣೀರು ಸುರಿಸಿದ್ರೆ ಪ್ರತಿಫಲ ಇವತ್ತು ನಮಗೆ ಒಂದು ಹನಿ ನೀರು ಸಿಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಂತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಒಂದು ಮಾತನ್ನು ಅವರಲ್ಲಿ ನಮಗೆ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಇದನ್ನು ನೋಡಿದಾಗ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅವರಿಗೆ ನೀರು ಅಂತಕ್ಕಂಥದ್ದು ಎಷ್ಟು ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಆಗಿತ್ತು, ಎಷ್ಟು ಮಹತ್ವದ್ದಾಗಿದ್ದು ಅಂತ ಅರ್ಥ. ಬಟ್ ವಿ ನೆವರ್ ಮ್ಯಾನೇಜ್ ಟು ವಿನ್ ಈವನ್ ಎ ಸ್ಮಾಲ್ ಪಡಲ್ ಆಫ್ ವಾಟರ್. ಪಡಲ್ ಅಂತ ಅಂದರೆ ಒಂದು ಅಂಡೆ, ಒಂದು ನೀರು ಕಾಯಿಸೋ ಅಂಡೆ ಅಂತ ಅರ್ಥ. ಅಂದರೆ ಇಷ್ಟೆಲ್ಲ ಕಷ್ಟಪಟ್ಟರು, ಇಷ್ಟೆಲ್ಲ ಕಣ್ಣೀರು ಸುರಿಸಿದ್ರು, ಇಷ್ಟೆಲ್ಲ ಬ್ಲಡ್ ಸುರಿಸಿದ್ರು, ಇಷ್ಟೆಲ್ಲ ಮೂಮೆಂಟ್ಸನ್ನು ಫೈಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು ಸಹ ಅಟ್ ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ನಮಗೆ ಒಂದು ಅಂಡೆ ನೀರು ಸಿಗಲಿಲ್ಲ. ದಟ್ ಮೀನ್ಸ್ ದೇ ಕುಡ್ ನಾಟ್ ಗೆಟ್ ದ ವಿಕ್ಟರಿ, ದ ಪೋಯಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಸೇಯಿಂಗ್. Of course, they had shed tears for many generations. Their blood flowed like streams, but they could not get the victory. They could not win even a small puddle of water, according to the poet. And again, she says, when I see water, I remember how we welcomed our weekly bath as if it was a wondrous festival. You can observe there is an exclamatory mark, which means it was a shocking thing for them, and of course they were very happy to have a weekly bath where the whole village used to have bath twice a day, but the untouchables had to take bath once in week for the sake of, because they had no water, there was lack of water for them. They were denied of those rights. They had no right to take water or draw water from the well. So when there was no water, how could they take bath? You just imagine. But the village people had rights to touch the water, to draw the water from the well, so that they were taking bath twice a day luxuriously. You just imagine how pitiful it is and how painful it is for them. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಪೋಯೆಟ್ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, ನೀರನ್ನು ನೋಡಿದಾಗ ನನಗೊಂದು ಜ್ಞಾಪಕ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಏನದು, ಈ ಅನ್ಟಚಬಲ್ಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ವೀಕ್ಲಿ ಒನ್ಸು ಸ್ನಾನ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರ ವೆಯ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರಂತೆ. ಯಾಕಂದರೆ ಪಾಪ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ನೀರಿರಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಅಕಸ್ಮಾತ್ ಬಾವಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ನೀರಿದ್ದು ಸಹ ಅವರಿಗೆ ಆ ನೀರನ್ನು ಸೇದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಆ ಒಂದು ನೀರನ್ನು ಕಾಯಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡು ಸ್ನಾನ ಮಾಡ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಒಂದು ರೈಟ್ಸ್ ಇರಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಆದ್ದರಿಂದ ಅವ್ರೇನು ಮಾಡ್ತಾಯಿದ್ರು, ವಾರಕ್ಕೊಂದಿನ ಸ್ನಾನ ಮಾಡ್ತಾಯಿದ್ರಂತೆ. ಆದರೆ ಈ ವಿಲೇಜ್ ಪೀಪಲ್ ಇದ್ದಾರಲ್ಲ, ಯಾರು ಈ ಬ್ರಾಹ್ಮಣ, ಕ್ಷತ್ರಿಯ, ವೈಶ್ಯ, ಶೂದ್ರ ಅಂತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಹೈಯರ್ ಕ್ಯಾಸ್ಟ್ ಪೀಪಲ್ ಇದ್ದಾರಲ್ಲ, ಅವರು ಲಕ್ಸುರಿಯಸ್ ಆಗಿ ಒಂದು ದಿನಕ್ಕೆ 2 ಸಲ ಸ್ನಾನ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರಂತೆ. ನೀವು ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ ಎಷ್ಟು ಇನ್ಹ್ಯೂಮನ್ ಇದು ಅಂತ, ಎಷ್ಟು ಅಮಾನವೀಯತೆ ಅಂತ. ಯಾಕಂತಂದರೆ ಊಟ ಇಲ್ಲದೆ ಇರೋನ ಪಕ್ಕದಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂತ್ಕೊಂಡು ನಾವು ಹೊಟ್ಟೆ ತುಂಬ ಊಟ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ಅವನು ಕೊಡ್ದಿರಾ ಅವನಿಗೇನು ಅನಿಸುತ್ತೆ? ಅದೇ ರೀತಿಯಾಗಿ ವಾರ ಪೂರ್ತಿ ವೆಯ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ ವಾರಕ್ಕೊಂದಿನ ಸ್ನಾನ ಮಾಡ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥವ್ರ ಹತ್ರ ಹೋಗಿ ನಾವು ದಿನಕ್ಕೆ 2 ಸಲ ಸ್ನಾನ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ಅವ್ರಿಗೇನಾಗುತ್ತೆ? ನೋವಾಗೇ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಇದನ್ನು ನೀವು ಅವ್ರ ಪ್ಲೇಸಲ್ಲಿದ್ದು ಇಮ್ಯಾಜಿನ್ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಂಡ್ರೆ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ದಿಸ್ ಈಸ್ ವಾಟ್ ಶಿ ರಿಮೆಂಬರ್ಸ್ ವೆನ್ ಶಿ ಸೀಸ್ ವಾಟರ್. ಸೊ ದೇರ್ ಮೈಟ್ ಬಿ ಒನ್ ಮೋರ್ ಕ್ವಶನ್ ಫಾರ್ ಯು ಫ್ರಮ್ ದಿಸ್. ವಾಟ್ ಈಸ್ ದ್ಯಾಟ್? ಹೂ ವೆಲ್ಕಮ್ಡ್ ದ ವೀಕ್ಲಿ ಬಾತ್? Who welcomed the weekly bath? The untouchables welcomed the weekly bath. Or what was the wondrous festival for the untouchables? For the untouchables, having bath weekly once was a wondrous festival for the untouchables. So how many times the entire village used to take bath? The entire village used to take bath luxuriously twice a day. These are the one more questions you may get from this second part or this paragraph. Follow the next lines. When I see water, I remember my childhood. Here the poet says, when she sees water, she remembers her childhood. Let us see what is that childhood memory she remembers when she sees water. It is said in the further lines. Follow that. When we walked miles, we in the sense untouchables are the poet and our companions might be, are the panchamas, are the untouchables. When we walked miles to reach the big canals and carried back heavy pots with the muscles and veins on our necks straining, bursting. Here, the words straining and bursting indicate how painful it was for these words indicate how painful it was for them to carry back heavy pots from the big canals. Here, they had to walk for miles together. The untouchables had to walk miles together to reach the big canal where the rainwater was stored. Here, you may get a doubt, that is, why the untouchables had to walk for miles to reach the big canals. The reason is that the untouchables had no right to draw water from the village well, so they had to walk for miles together to reach the big canal. Canal in the sense where the place where the rainwater was stored, that is called canal. Here, the untouchables had to walk miles to reach the big canal, and from there they had to carry back heavy pots on their heads. So, while carrying back those heavy pots on their heads, their muscles and veins used to strain and burst. It means it was very painful for them. So, this is what the childhood memory she remembers when she sees water. ಸೊ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಪೊಯೆಟ್ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, ನೀರನ್ನು ನೋಡಿದಾಗ ಅವರಿಗೆ ಅವರ ಒಂದು ಬಾಲ್ಯದ ನೆನಪು ಜ್ಞಾಪಕ ಬರುತ್ತಂತೆ. ಏನಪ್ಪ ಅದು ಬಾಲ್ಯದ ನೆನಪು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ, ಅವರಿಗೆ ಊರಲ್ಲಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಬಾವಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ನೀರನ್ನು ಸೇದೋದಕ್ಕೆ ರೈಟ್ಸ್ ಇರಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ಆದ್ರಿಂದ ಅವ್ರೇನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರು, ಊರಿಂದ ಹೊರಗಡೆ ಇರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ದೊಡ್ಡ ಕಾಲುವೆಗೆ ಹೋಗಿ ನೀರನ್ನು ತರಬೇಕಾಗಿತ್ತು. ಆ ಕಾಲುವೆಗೆ ನೀರೆಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು, ಮಳೆ ಬಿದ್ದಾಗ ಏನಾಗ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು, ನೀರು ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಸ್ಟೋರ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು. ಸೊ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹೋಗಿ ಅವರು ನೀರನ್ನು ತರಬೇಕಾಗಿತ್ತು. ಅದು ತುಂಬ ದೂರ ಇದ್ದಿದ್ದರಿಂದ ಪದೇ ಪದೇ ಹೋಗಿ ತಗೊಂಬರೋಕ್ಕೆ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇರಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಆದ್ದರಿಂದ ಅವ್ರೇನು ಮಾಡ್ತಾಯಿದ್ರು, ಹೆವಿ ಪಾಟ್ಸನ್ನು ತಗೊಂಡು ತಮ್ಮ ತಲೆ ಮೇಲೆ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರು. ಸೊ ಅಷ್ಟು ದೂರದಿಂದ ಹೆವಿ ಪಾಟ್ಸ್, ತುಂಬ ದೊಡ್ಡದಾಗಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಮಡಿಕೆಯನ್ನು ತಲೆ ಮೇಲೆ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ನೀರು ತುಂಬಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡು ಬರಬೇಕು ಅಂತಂದರೆ ಅವ್ರಿಗೇನಾಗ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು, ತುಂಬ ಕಷ್ಟ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತಂತೆ. ಸೊ ಆ ನೀರನ್ನು ತೊಗೊಂಡು ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾಗ ಅವರ ಒಂದು ಕತ್ತಿನ ಮೇಲಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ನರಗಳೆಲ್ಲ ಏನಾಗ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು, ಸ್ಟ್ರೇನ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು, ಬರ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತಂತೆ, ಅಂದರೆ ನೋವಾಗ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತಂತೆ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ. ಸೊ ಈ ಒಂದು ನೋವನ್ನು ಅವ್ರೇನು ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಜ್ಞಾಪಕ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅದೇ ರೀತಿಯಾಗಿ ನೀರನ್ನು ನೋಡಿದಾಗ ಅವರಿಗೆ ಅದು ಜ್ಞಾಪಕ ಬರುತ್ತಂತೆ. ಸೊ ದಿಸ್ ಈಸ್ ಹಿಯರ್ ವಿ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಸಿ the hardships for a pot of water, just for a pot of water, how many hardships they faced. This is what we are going to see, and this is the childhood memory of the poet. She remembers when she sees water. What is that? They had to walk for miles to reach the big canal, and from there they had to carry back heavy pots. Just for the sake of water, for a pot of water, this much pain they had to accept, they had to face, and these hardships were inevitable for them for the sake of water. And these hardships were not for all the people, only for the untouchables. So this is what the childhood memory of the poet. So this is the end for today. We shall discuss the remaining in the next class.